For 17 days, the 7-year-old girl sat on cold wooden steps, waiting for a father who would never come back. The whole town of Prospect, Wyoming walked right past her. They tipped their hats, they hurried on by, they made her somebody else's problem. But on the 18th day, a drifter named Caleb Rhodes finally stopped. He was a man running from his own ghosts, a man who had buried his wife and his 4-year-old son 3 years before. He had nothing left to give, or so he thought. When he knelt down and asked that little girl her name, he had no idea she was about to save his life just as surely as he was about to save hers. What happens when two broken souls find each other? What happens when a man who swore he would never love again meets a child who refuses to stop believing in promises? This is a story about the courage it takes to stop running, about how family is not always about blood. It is about choosing someone day after day and refusing to look away. Sometimes the person who saves you is the one you never expected, and sometimes being brave enough to stop for someone else is what finally brings you home. If you believe that one person choosing not to look away can change everything, stay until the very end. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from today. A hard November wind cut through town, and Caleb Rhodes felt it clear to his bones. He was a man running from his past, never staying in one place long enough for folks to get curious. Prospect was just another dusty street he was fixing to leave behind. But then he saw her, a small child sitting on the steps of the general store, hugging her knees like she was trying to hold herself together. She wore a faded dress and no coat against the biting cold. But it was her face that stopped him cold. It was the look of someone still believing a promise would be kept. He tied up his horse and walked over. "You waiting for someone?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. She looked up with wide, clear eyes. "My papa," she said with all the certainty in the world. Caleb looked around the empty street. "He told me to wait right here," she explained like she was reciting a lesson. "He went to find work and said he'd come back for me." A cold feeling settled in Caleb's gut. "How long ago was that?" The little girl tilted her head. "I think 17 days now." 17 days. In this cold. "Where's your mama?" he asked gently. "She died a while back," the girl said simply. "It was just me and Papa. But he promised he'd be back." Caleb knew all about broken promises. He'd made a few himself. "What's your name, little one?" "Leah Hart." "Well, Leah, I'm Caleb. Have you eaten today?" She just shook her head. "Come on," he said, holding out a scarred hand. "Let's get you some food. You can watch the steps from the restaurant right across the street." That seemed to make sense to her. She put her tiny hand in his and let him help her up. Her legs were shaky like they weren't used to standing at all. The restaurant was run by a woman named Martha. Her eyes took in the scene, moving from the tired drifter to the little girl, and her face softened just a bit. "Caleb Rhodes," she said. "Heard you'd moved on." "Keeps happening," he said, leading Leah to a table by the window. "This here is Leah Hart. She's waiting for her daddy." Martha nodded slowly. "The Hart girl. We've all seen her out there." It sounded like a confession. "Figured she could wait better with a full stomach," Caleb said, pulling out some coins. "Stew, bread, and some milk." While they waited, he asked Leah, "Where was your papa headed?" "To the big Dalton ranch," she said, her voice filled with pride. "Papa's real good with horses. He said Mr. Dalton pays good money and we could get a little house." The food came, and Leah ate like she'd forgotten how. When the bowl was clean, she whispered, "Thank you." Martha waved Caleb into the kitchen. "That child's been out there for over 2 weeks, Caleb," she said, her arms crossed. "The store owner lets her sleep in the stockroom, but nobody's taken her in. Nobody wants the responsibility." "Why not?" Caleb asked. "Because taking her in means admitting her father ain't coming back," Martha said, her voice low. "And maybe we ain't ready to do that. We can't save everyone out here." Caleb looked back at Leia, who was watching the street again. He was good at riding past trouble. It was what he always did. "Which way is the Dalton place?" he asked Martha. "Straight south," she replied, "about 10 miles. Caleb went back to the table. Leia's small face was pressed against the glass. "Leia," he said softly, "I'm heading out to the Dalton ranch to look for work myself. If I see your papa, I'll tell him you're waiting right here." Hope lit up her eyes like a sunrise. "You'll tell him I waited, just like he said?" "I'll tell him." He turned to leave, but her small voice stopped him. "And you'll come back? Even if you don't find him?" The question hung in the air. He was a man who always moved on. But looking at her, he found himself saying, "Yeah, little one, I'll come back," instead of handling the tough parts himself. But her creekwater eyes stopped him from lying. He said, "I will come back." She nodded, and he left money for her supper. Caleb rode south as a light snow began to fall. The Dalton Ranch was a sprawling place built from generations of hard work. The corrals were full of fine horses, the kind with bloodlines stretching back before the war. He found Jack Dalton by the breaking pen. Dalton was in his mid-50s, weathered and watchful. "Looking for work," Caleb said. Dalton shook his head. "Got a full crew." Caleb should have left, but he had to ask. "Did you hire a man named Hart about 2 or 3 weeks back? He had a little girl waiting in town." Dalton's face hardened. "Yes, I hired him, but that was only 2 days before—" "Before what?" "Before he got killed." Dalton's voice was flat. "A spirited colt threw him into the fence, broke his neck. He died right there." The snow was falling harder now. Caleb asked, "Did he mention a daughter?" Dalton shook his head. "We found a half-written letter telling her he had work and would come for her soon. We asked around, but no one knew where to find the girl." Caleb's voice was low. "He told her to wait on the steps of the general store. She has been there for 17 days. Dalton's face went pale. "Dear God?" "We buried him in the small cemetery on the property, in an unmarked grave. We did not know his people. Is someone taking care of her now? The town folks give her scraps, let her sleep in a stockroom. But no one has taken her in." "And you?" Dalton asked. "What are you going to do?" Caleb looked out at the snowy hills as the light faded from the sky. He said, "I am going to tell her the truth." Dalton nodded slowly. "That is a hard thing to do." Caleb simply said, "I am the man who stopped." He rode back to town as the cold settled into his bones. Leia was still on the steps, wrapped in a blanket. When she saw him, she stood up so fast the blanket fell. Hope shined in her eyes. "Did you see him? Did you tell him I'm waiting?" Caleb sat down beside her. "Leia, I need to tell you something, and it is going to be hard to hear." Her hope began to fade. "He is not coming, is he?" "No, honey, he is not. Your papa got that job at the Dalton Ranch. Mr. Dalton hired him right away. But there was an accident. A horse threw him. He was hurt very badly." The words felt like rocks in his throat. "He did not suffer." "Leia, but he died about 2 days after he left you here." She just stared as the snow fell on her hair and her small, shaking hands. "No," she whispered. "He promised." "I know he did," Caleb said softly. "And he meant to keep that promise. But sometimes things happen that are nobody's fault." Her face crumpled. It was not a loud tantrum, but a quiet, complete devastation. Her world had just disappeared. She stood there silently as tears ran down her cheeks, her small body shaking with grief. Caleb did the only thing he could. He pulled her into his arms and held her tight. He let her cry against his chest while the snow fell and the town went on with its business, not knowing her world had just shattered. She finally whispered into his coat, "What happens now?" "Now," he said, "we figure out what comes next. But not tonight. Tonight, we get you somewhere warm." A woman named Martha gave them a small, clean room above her restaurant. It was warm and dry. Leah was quiet as Martha washed her face and checked her feet. She seemed broken, the hope that held her together now gone. When they were alone, Caleb sat in the room's only chair. "You should sleep," he said. She looked at him with old eyes. "If I sleep, I will wake up and have to feel it all over again." Caleb knew she was right. "Did your parents die?" she asked. "My mother did when I was about your age. Did it stop hurting?" He thought about his own losses. "The pain never really leaves," he told her. "It just gets quieter. It stops being sharp and becomes a dull ache, like an old injury." "Will I stop missing him?" "No," he said, "but you will learn to carry it." She nodded, then whispered, "I do not want to be alone." "You are not alone right now. But what about tomorrow when you leave?" "I'm not leaving tomorrow." Her head shot up. "You are not?" "No. I figure I will stick around a few days. Make sure you are settled in right." Something that was not quite hope sparked in her eyes. "Why?" "Because I stopped," he thought. "Because I saw you, and I cannot just ride away. Because someone should," he said out loud. She sized him up with those clear creek water eyes. Finally, she laid down and pulled the blanket to her chin. "Will you stay until I fall asleep?" "I will stay." Caleb was a man of his word. He sat in that chair as her breathing slowed, listening to the snow fall outside. He thought about promises and the weight of staying put when it would be easier to leave. He thought about a little girl who at 7 years old had learned the toughest lesson of all. Waiting does not mean anyone is coming. "Right?" the old liveryman asked. "The Heart Girl. I do not know. Are you going to be the one to sort it out?" Caleb did not have an answer. He could not sleep that night, listening to the horses shift below. He realized he could not remember the last time he had let himself care about what happened to another soul. He had drifted a long way from the man he had meant to be. Morning came, cold and bright. Caleb found Leah at a table in Martha's restaurant, eating eggs like she was just going through the motions. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied, her voice flat. They ate without a word. Then Caleb spoke up. "I need to talk to some folks today. Figure out the options. You want to come with me or stay here with Martha? Will you come back?" "Yes, then I will stay." A few families might take her in for a bit, but nobody wanted her for good. Too many mouths to feed as it was. "Best thing is to send her east," Sheriff Hoskins said, leaning back in his chair. "Church groups back there find families for orphans." "You mean ship her off to folks who want cheap labor," Caleb said. "I mean give her a chance at something better than starving out here," Hoskins snapped back. "You got a better idea?" Caleb did not. That was the problem. He was walking back when Brennan, the store owner, stopped him. "Look, I know how it seems," Brennan started. "But you got to understand, we are not equipped for a child. We could not afford it." "Save it," Caleb said, and kept walking. Brennan grabbed his arm. "I am not a heartless man. I let her sleep in the stockroom, gave her food. But taking on a child for good, that is different. That is permanent." Caleb looked down at the man's hand until he let go. "She is 7 years old. She spent 17 days on your steps waiting for a dead man. You gave her scraps. Do not go expecting a medal. Generosity." He left Brennan standing there, but the man's words stuck with him. Permanent requires resources. That was the hard truth of it, was it not? Taking on a child meant money, a home, and stability. It meant staying in one place long enough to build something. At Martha's, Leah was helping wash dishes, standing on a stool to reach the basin. She insisted, Martha said when Caleb walked in, said she ought to earn her keep. She is 7, and she has more sense than half the grown-ups in this town. Caleb told her the options he had found. The orphanage in Cheyenne or the church programs back east. Martha listened, then shook her head. She will not last in an orphanage. She is too quiet. And those Eastern outfits often just use children for unpaid farm work. So what is the alternative? Someone takes her in. For real. Adopts her, legal and proper. Who? Martha just looked at him. Maybe folks are waiting to see if you will. Hit him like a punch. Me? You are the one who fed her. You are the one who rode out to find her daddy and the one who told her the truth. You are the one she keeps asking about. Will Caleb come back? Children get attached to whoever shows up. I cannot, Caleb stammered. I am a drifter, Martha. I do not have a home. I sleep in barns. How am I supposed to raise a child? By stopping, she said. Two simple, impossible words. I had a home once, he said, his voice low. A wife, a son. They died. I learned that staying put just gives fate a fixed target. So you have been running ever since, she replied. That is not the same as living. I knew your wife, Emma. Living like a ghost does not honor her memory. It just wastes yours. Later that night, Jack Dalton walked in, snow in his beard. Heard you were still in town, Dalton said. Figured we should talk. About the fact that you need work, and I need a good foreman, and about you taking an interest in Nate Hart's daughter. I would not call it interest, Caleb said. I just cannot walk away from a 7-year-old with nowhere to turn. That is more than most can say, Dalton replied. Here is my offer. I have a foreman's cabin sitting empty. 2 rooms, a stove, solid roof. The job comes with wages and board for your horse. You want it? It is yours. Why? Because I need a man I can trust. Dalton paused. And because if you take that job and that cabin, maybe you would have a place to bring a little girl who needs one. There it was, laid out plain as day. I do not know how to be a father. Neither did most of us when we started, Dalton said, standing up. Think on it. I need an answer by tomorrow. Caleb sat alone in the dark, the snow falling outside. He thought about the promise he had made himself to never care that much again. Then he thought about the little girl upstairs and about what Martha said. Stop running. Alone, Caleb promised. The next day, Dalton offered him a job in a small cabin. It was a chance to stay. But being a parent was not about having all the answers. It was about showing up day after day, especially when things were hard. That night, Caleb stood in the doorway of Lia's room watching her sleep. She looked so small, yet she was still here, still breathing. In that quiet moment, he made his choice. He would take Dalton's offer. He would take the job and the cabin. And in the morning, he would ask Lia if she wanted to stop waiting and start living. He did not know if it would work, but he was willing to try. For tonight, he would just stand watch. He would let himself imagine what it felt like to have a reason to stay. For 3 years, he had not truly watched over a single thing. Now, his back ached, but his heart was finally quiet. He found Lia sitting on the bed, staring at the wall. Her eyes, the color of creek water, were hollowed out from crying. Are you sending me away? She asked, her voice small. No, he said gently. But we need to talk. Get dressed and come on downstairs. Martha has breakfast fixins for us. Down in the corner of the bustling cafe, he finally spoke. I talked with Mr. Dalton yesterday. A flicker of something, maybe hope, crossed her face. He offered me a job as his new foreman. It is steady work. The job comes with a cabin on the ranch. Are you going to take it? She asked. That depends, Caleb said, leaning in so she could see he was telling the truth. It depends on if you will come with me, if you will let me look after you proper, for good. The word permanent hung in the air between them. Her fork clattered on her plate. You mean like a father? He nodded slowly. Someday, if that is what you wanted. I am not going to pretend I know what I am doing, because I do not. But I can tell you this. If you come with me, your days of waiting for someone are over. You will have a home. She looked at him with eyes far older than her 7 years. Why would you do this for me? Because seeing you stopped me in my tracks, and I cannot seem to get moving again. But what if you change your mind? What if you leave? That was the real question, the one that truly mattered. I cannot promise I will not make mistakes, Caleb said, holding her gaze. But I can promise you this. I will not leave. Not like that. And I sure as heck will not tell you to wait for me and then just disappear. Tears welled in her eyes. What if I am a burden? You are not a burden. You are a little girl who deserves a better hand. She didn't waste a second. Laya put down her fork and said, I want to go with you. I'm done waiting. Caleb felt a 3-year-old lock on his heart finally start to give way, letting a little light in. All right then, he said gently. We'll make it official. But first, let's get you some proper clothes. When she worried about money, he just shook his head. It's my treat. That's part of the deal. They walked to Brennan's general store, the same place she'd waited for 17 days. She froze at the bottom step, the memory of it heavy on her small shoulders. We can go somewhere else, Caleb offered. She lifted her chin, her voice steady. No, I want to go in and buy things like a regular person. A sudden, fierce pride swelled in Caleb's chest. Inside, the owner, Brennan, looked up, his face a mix of guilt and shame. Caleb kept his voice even. Morning, Brennan. We need to outfit the girl. Brennan's wife, Mary, a nervous woman with darting eyes, came to help. She measured Laya, who stood perfectly still like a little doll. Then Mary held up a dress the color of a winter sky, a soft blue wool. This would bring out your eyes, she whispered. Laya reached out and touched the fabric. Can I have this one? She asked, looking up at Caleb. He smiled. You can have whatever you want, little one. They left with bundles of new clothes, a heavy coat and proper shoes. Tucked inside one bag was a small wooden horse Caleb had added when she wasn't looking. On the way back, he stopped at the sheriff's office. Wait here a minute, he told her. Inside, Sheriff Hoskins was already expecting him. Came to make it legal, Caleb said, getting straight to the point. Hoskins laid out the process. Normally it took time, but given the circumstances, he could speed things up. You'll file for guardianship, the sheriff explained. Prove you can support her and that you're of sound moral character. He looked Caleb square in the eye. You sure about this, Caleb? Raising a child alone ain't like mending fence. She's been through a lot. Caleb thought of his own long nights and quiet sorrows. I'm as prepared as any man can be. All right then, Hoskins said, nodding. The papers will be ready for you tomorrow. Outside, Laya looked small, sitting on the bench. Do you think Papa would be mad I didn't wait longer? She asked quietly. Caleb sat beside her. Your Papa wanted you to be safe. Seeing you choose to start living again, well, I reckon he'd be mighty proud. She leaned her shoulder against his arm, just for a moment, and he didn't pull away. That night, Caleb sat down and wrote a letter he knew he'd never send. He didn't address it to his late wife, Emma. He just wrote the words. I stopped running today. I found a little girl who needed someone to be there. I'm going to try to build a home again. I am scared to death, but I figure being scared and doing it anyway has to count for something. I hope you'd understand. He folded the paper and tucked it away. Some things just need to be said, even to an empty room. The next day was for getting ready. Caleb bought supplies to last them through the winter: flour, bacon, coffee, and extra blankets. He also bought Laya a few books and a small leather satchel for school. At the leather shop, an old German man named Schmidt adjusted the strap to fit her. Heard you're taking in the Hart girl, Schmidt said without looking up from his work. My wife and we took in 2 orphans 20 years back. It ain't easy. Some days you'll wonder what in the world you were thinking. But those days pass, he said, handing the finished satchel to Caleb. And what's left is family. Caleb left feeling like some of his own doubts had been patched up along with the leather. At the sheriff's office, the papers were waiting. Caleb signed his name, his hand steady, on the 2nd of December, 1883. It was real now. You're doing a good thing, Caleb, Hoskins said, blotting the ink. Not many men would. "It's not about being good," Caleb replied. "It's about doing what needs to be done." The sheriff nodded. "That's usually what good is." He told Caleb about the small school near the ranch, run by a teacher named Miss Caroline Pritchard. Leia would start after the new year, another new beginning. Caleb had never cared much for school himself, but he was determined that Leia would have every chance. She would have a real education and a future far bigger than waiting on cold stone steps or someone's wife. He walked back to Martha's with the weight of those papers in his pocket. A new life for a little girl named Leia. She was upstairs, carefully packing a few new things into a bag, treating them like treasure. Caleb watched from the doorway. He asked, "You ready to go?" She looked around the small room and said, "I think so." He told her, "Tomorrow, you stop waiting for your life to start. You start living it." For the first time, a real smile reached her 7-year-old eyes. That night, Martha cooked them a special dinner. As they ate, Leia asked Martha if she would visit. Her voice was already learning not to hold on too tight to people. Martha promised she would. Later, after Leia was asleep, Martha sat with Caleb in the quiet restaurant. "Are you scared?" she asked. "Terrified," he admitted. Martha nodded. "Good, that means you understand." She then told him she had known his wife Emma years ago, a sweet woman with a kind heart. Caleb's throat got tight. He told her about his boy, Tommy, who was only 4 when the fever took him. "A loss like that changes a man," Martha said, her voice soft. Caleb stared into his coffee. "It did," he said. "It made me run. I figured if I kept everything temporary, I could not lose anything that mattered." He looked up at her. "Now I am choosing to care again. For a little girl who has lost everything, every part of me wants to run. Part of me." But Martha told him to stop running from ghosts. "You think Emma and Tommy would want you just existing?" she asked. "That little girl upstairs needs someone who understands loss. Maybe you are exactly what she needs. And maybe she is what you need too." His friend's words stayed with him all night. The next morning was clear and cold. Caleb packed their few belongings on his horse. It was not much for 2 lives starting over, but it was a beginning. Leia came downstairs in her new blue dress and warm coat. She looked more solid, more present. After hugging Martha goodbye, they walked to the edge of town. Leia paused for a moment to look back. "I am saying goodbye," she whispered. "To Papa, to waiting, to being the girl on the steps." Then she asked Caleb, "Will I forget him?" Caleb shook his head. "No. You will carry the memory of his love with you. That does not go away." With that, they turned south toward the Dalton Ranch. For the first time in 3 long years, Caleb Rhodes was not running from something. He was walking toward it. The 10-mile ride was quiet. He could feel how tense Leia was, sitting in front of him on the saddle. He told her softly, "You do not need their permission to exist, Leia. Anyone who has a problem with you can answer to me." She relaxed just a little, leaning back against his chest. As they came over a hill, the Dalton Ranch spread out below them. It was a huge operation with barns, corrals, and horses everywhere. Leia gasped, "There are so many!" Jack Dalton himself met them in the yard. His weathered face broke into a kind smile when he saw Leia. "This must be Miss Hart," he said gently. "Your papa was a good man. I am sorry for your loss." "Thank you, sir," Leia whispered, suddenly shy. Dalton nodded toward a small cabin. "The foreman's cabin is ready for you. My wife, Sarah, will be down to help you get settled." He looked at Caleb. "This is a good thing you are doing, Rhodes." As they walked toward their new home, Caleb felt Leia's small hand slip into his. "It is going to be all right," he said. "How do you know?" she asked. He looked down at her and said, "I do not. But we are going to make it all right anyway." The cabin was simple and clean, smelling of pine and wood smoke. It had a stone fireplace and rough shelves on the wall. It was not much, but it was a home. It was a start. The cabin had 2 rooms. One was a small bedroom with a window facing the pastures. "Which room is mine?" Laya asked, turning in a slow circle. "The small one," he answered. "It is more private. You need walls and a door more than I do." Soon, a warm fire was crackling, and their few belongings were put away. Sarah Dalton, the ranch owner's wife, arrived with a basket of food. She was a kind woman in her 50s. "Welcome to the ranch," she said with a warm smile. "I want you both to know you are not alone out here." "And you, Laya," she said, crouching down. "You call me Sarah. We are mighty glad to have you here." "I always did want a daughter," Sarah said with a warm smile. "Maybe you'll let an old woman fuss over you some. There is a small schoolhouse about 2 miles east of here. You will start after the new year. For now, you just settle in and rest." After she left, the cabin was mighty quiet. Laya finally broke the silence. "What do we do now?" she asked. "We learn how to live," Caleb told her. "I will start work with the horses tomorrow. You will figure out how to stay out of trouble." "I do not get into trouble," she insisted. "Everyone gets into trouble," he said, clearing their plates. "You like horses. Your papa taught you. You can spend time at the barns with me, long as you are careful." Her whole face lit up. "Really? I can go to the barns?" "Yes, but there are rules. You do not go into a stall alone, and you do not approach a horse without asking permission first. And you stay where I can see you. You understand?" "Yes, sir," she answered. "And stop calling me sir. My name is Caleb." "Papa said I should. It is respectful." "Your papa was right about many things, but I am not your boss. I am trying to be something more than that. So Caleb is fine." She thought on it for a moment, then gave a nod. "Okay, Caleb." Later that night, Caleb sat by the fire, wondering what on earth he had done. Just 24 hours ago, he was a man with no ties. Now he was the guardian to a little girl who looked at him with a whole lot of trust. He thought about his wife, Emma. She always wanted a house full of laughter. The fever took that dream away. He figured he was done with dreams, too. Yet here he was, on a ranch in Wyoming, with a child sleeping in the next room and a job to do. He must have dozed off because a small, muffled sound from Leia's room woke him right up. He moved quiet as a mouse to her door. She was curled up, tangled in her blankets, and making little noises in her sleep. A nightmare. He had been expecting it. Trouble always waits for the dark and the quiet. "Laya," he said gently, "wake up. You are just dreaming." She shot straight up with a gasp, her eyes wide with fear in the dim light. "Papa?" Her voice broke. "I dreamed he was calling me, but he could not find me." Caleb sat on the edge of her bed. "It was just a dream. Your papa would have come back if he could have." "But I kept running and running," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "What if I forget what he looked like? What if I forget his voice?" "You will not forget the important parts," Caleb said, smoothing her hair back. "Memory holds on to what matters. It holds on to the feeling of being loved. That part never goes away." "Do you remember your little boy, Tommy?" she asked. The question caught him right off guard. "Yes, I remember him." "Do you miss him every day? Does it get easier?" Caleb thought about telling a comforting lie, but this little girl had earned the truth. "It gets different," he said. "The sharp edges wear down. You learn to carry it, but no, it does not get easier. You just get stronger." She was quiet for a bit. "Can you stay until I fall asleep again?" "Of course." He sat in a creaky chair by her bed long after her breathing grew slow and deep. When he finally stood up, his back ached, and dawn was breaking. But he also felt a strange new sense of purpose. The next morning was cold. He got the fire going and was frying eggs when Leia came out of her room, still half asleep. "Morning," he said. She just nodded and held her hands out to the fire. "What time is it?" she asked. "Early. Ranch work starts with the light." They ate fast, dressed warm, and headed out into the busy morning. Leia stayed close to his side, taking in all the noise and movement. They met Sam, the head farrier, at the main barn. He was a compact man with powerful arms. Sam gave Caleb a nod, then knelt down to Leia's level. "Do you know anything about horses, Miss Hart?" "A little. My papa taught me." "Good," Sam said. "Then you can help me today. I need someone to hand me tools." Leia looked at Caleb, her eyes full of hope. "Long as she stays clear of the hooves, she will be fine," Caleb said. "I am careful with my helpers," Sam promised, holding out a hand to Leia. Caleb spent the morning learning the rhythms of the ranch. It was good, familiar work, and he fell into it like putting on an old, comfortable coat. Some folks figured a man like Caleb Rhodes had no business raising a little girl. He was a man haunted by loss, and Leia was a child who had lost everything. But sometimes two broken souls can piece each other back together. This is a story about how patience, not force, can gentle the wildest heart, whether it belongs to a horse or a man. At the ranch, Caleb watched Leia as she helped the blacksmith, Sam. She was a natural around the horses, quiet and careful. The other ranch hands accepted her without a fuss, simply making room for her at the lunch table. Later, Caleb took her to the training corral. A young hand named Billy was wrestling with a tough bay gelding and losing badly. Dalton, the foreman, just nodded at Caleb. "He is all yours," he said. Caleb entered the corral not with force but with stillness. He let the horse get used to him, showing the animal he was not a threat. Leia watched from the fence, her eyes wide with focus. Caleb could see her father's teachings in her gaze. He gently mounted the gelding, and after one small buck the horse settled. For 30 minutes, Caleb simply rode him, building a quiet trust. When he dismounted, Leia was smiling. "Papa used to do that," she said softly. "Make angry horses calm." Caleb promised to teach her, and she beamed, saying none of it sounded boring at all. Their days fell into a rhythm. Leia learned about hoof care with Sam, and in the evenings Caleb taught her to cook. Those nights were filled with 1,000 questions from a curious 7-year-old girl. "Why do horses sleep standing up?" she would ask. Then one night she asked, "What happened to your parents?" The question stopped him cold. He told her plainly how he had lost them both. "Is that why you understand about missing people?" she asked. He turned and looked at the little girl with the knowing eyes. "Yeah," he said. "That is why I understand." On Sunday they went to church. After the service, most of the town's women were kind, welcoming Leia with warm smiles. But one woman, a Mrs. Patterson, cornered him on the steps. Her face was sharp, and her questions were sharper. "So you have taken her in, Mr. Rhodes?" she demanded. "The guardianship papers are filed," Caleb said, his voice steady. "Adoption will follow." She looked him up and down. "And you think you can raise a girl alone, without a wife for proper guidance?" Caleb's jaw was tight, but his words were calm and clear. "I am prepared to provide her a home, safety, and a chance to heal. That seems proper enough to me." "What that little girl needs is a proper mother's influence," Mrs. Patterson declared. Caleb's voice went low and hard. "She needs a roof, food, and safety. If that is not proper enough for you, I do not know what is." Before the woman could argue, Sarah stepped in, smooth as you please, and guided her away. Leia's hand was clenched tight in Caleb's. "I am sorry," she whispered. "You did not cause a thing," he said, squeezing her hand. "Some folks just cannot mind their own business." He knelt down right there on the church steps for all to see. "Listen to me, Leia. Nobody knows everything about raising a child. We just do our best. And my best means making sure you know you are wanted and safe. That is more than most kids get." That evening, Leia asked if she could write a letter to her papa. Caleb set her up at the table with paper and a pencil. When she finished, she brought the folded note to the fireplace. "I want to send it so he knows," she said, placing it on the burning logs. They watched the paper curl into ash and disappear up the chimney. She stood very still, her hands clasped together. When the last piece was gone, she turned to Caleb. I told him I found someone good, she said. Someone who stays. The simple truth in her voice hit him hard. He pulled her into a hug, feeling her small arms wrap around his waist. For the first time, he let himself believe he could do this. As winter settled in, their little cabin started to feel like a home. But Laya was worried about starting school. "What if the other children think I'm strange?" she asked one morning. "Kids can be cruel sometimes," Caleb admitted while stoking the fire. "But they can also surprise you. You will not know until you give them a chance." He walked her the 2 miles to the schoolhouse that first day. The little building was buzzing with life, and a kind-faced teacher named Miss Pritchard welcomed them inside. When Caleb returned that afternoon, he found Leia chattering happily with another girl named Annie. "A Wyoming winter. You will ride with me until this weather breaks, then we will figure out the next step." She looked like she wanted to argue, but my face must have told her not to. Instead, she just said, "Thank you." When I asked for what, she replied, "For caring enough to say no. Papa always said that real love means telling someone no when they need to hear it." That familiar ache hit my chest. Her papa was a wise man. A week later, Sarah Dalton showed up at our door with a basket and a purpose. "I am here to get Leia ready for school," she announced, walking right past me. "A girl needs proper supplies, and she needs to know what is coming so she is not scared." Leia came out of her room and Sarah's whole face softened. "Hello, dear. I thought we could get you ready for Miss Pritchard's class. Would you like that?" Leia glanced at me and I just nodded. I was grateful to escape to the barn. I found Sam there, struggling with a mare that had been mistreated in her past. She fought him every time he tried to touch her feet. "She been this way long?" I asked, seeing the white around her eyes. "Since Dalton bought her at auction 6 months back," Sam said with a sigh. "Her last owner beat her something fierce, left scars. She might be a lost cause." I asked him, "Mind if I give it a try?" He just shrugged. "Be my guest. I am all out of ideas." For the next hour, I just stood with that horse. I did not try to touch her. I just talked to her in a low, steady voice. I told her about being on the run for 3 years, and about a little girl who waited on cold steps because she still believed someone would keep a promise. Finally, the mare's ears relaxed. Her breathing slowed. When I reached for her leg, she flinched, but did not pull away. "Easy now," I whispered. "Nobody's going to hurt you anymore." I knew what it felt like to not trust a soul. But there are still good folks in this world, if you can find the nerve to give them a chance. The mare lifted her hoof, just for a second, but it was a start. Sam just stared. "I will be damned. How did you do that?" I told him it just takes patience, and knowing what it is like to be scared. When I got back to the cabin, Sarah had worked wonders. School supplies were laid out, and Leia was at the table practicing her letters with her tongue stuck out in concentration. Watching them, something warm spread through my chest. This was what Leia needed, a whole community of people, not just me. After Sarah left, Leia showed me everything. She told me about a girl her age named Annie Thornton, whose family had the ranch to the east. "Sarah thinks we might be friends," she said. I told her that would be good, that everyone needs friends. Then she looked right at me and asked, "Do you have friends, Caleb?" The question hit me hard. I had men I worked with, but real friends, not in a long, long time. "Why not?" she asked. I told her making friends means staying put, and I had not been good at staying anywhere. She thought about that for a second. "But you are staying now." "Yeah, I am." "Then maybe you can make friends now, too," she said. So simple and true. It was a terrifying thought, letting people get that close again, but for the first time in forever, it also felt a little like hope. The first day of school came on a bitter, windy morning. I bundled Leia up and put her on the horse in front of me. She was tense the whole ride, trembling right through all her wool layers. As we got close, I told her, You do not have to be perfect, you just have to try. But she was worried. What if I'm not smart enough? Then Miss Pritchard would be wrong, I said. You are one of the smartest people I know. We reached the door and met Miss Pritchard, a tall woman with clear, kind eyes. She knelt down to Leia's level. You must be Leia Hart. I've been looking forward to you joining our class. Leia's voice was just a whisper. You have? Of course, the teacher said with a smile. She looked up at me. Mrs. Dalton has explained everything. Leia will be treated like any other student here. She will get a fair chance. That was all I ever wanted for her. Miss Pritchard put a gentle hand on Leia's shoulder. Come inside, I will introduce you to everyone. Leia looked back at me one last time, her eyes filled with both fear and hope. I gave her a small nod and she walked through that door with her head held high. A wave of pride hit me so hard it nearly took my breath away. Bravery is not about being fearless. It is about moving forward even when you are terrified. Leia had that kind of bravery. The whole day I could not stop thinking about her. I worried if the other kids were being kind, if she was doing all right. When it was finally time to pick her up, I rode faster than I needed to. I got there just as the students were coming out. Leia appeared with another girl, her face full of smiles. They were chattering away, already friends, and in that moment I knew everything was going to be just fine. This is Annie, Leia said, her face bright. She taught me about fractions using pi. On the ride home, Leia told him all about her day. It was hard, but a good kind of hard, she explained. Miss Pritchard is strict, but she's fair. She said my penmanship was excellent. Leia paused for a moment. When she asked us to write about someone we admired, I wrote about Papa, how he always kept his promises. I was so scared this morning, Leia confessed over dinner. But it was just normal. I got to be normal. That feeling of victory carried them through the next few weeks. The nightmares that haunted Leia began to fade. Then, one evening, a man delivered an official envelope from the courthouse in Cheyenne. Caleb opened it to find a court summons. Someone had filed a petition questioning his fitness as a guardian. The court intended to place Leia in an orphanage. His heart turned to ice. But as he looked at Leia, sleeping soundly by the fire, the ice turned to steel. He was not going to lose her. At the hearing, Mrs. Patterson spoke about his unsuitability. But then Sarah spoke of his kindness. Miss Pritchard described how Leia was thriving. Finally, Leia herself stood and told the judge, "Caleb stays. He is my home." The judge looked at Mrs. Patterson, then at Caleb and Leia. He cleared his throat and declared the petition dismissed. Caleb was granted full custody. They walked out of that courthouse not as a foreman and an orphan, but as a father and a daughter, finally and truly home. A few weeks later, the foreman, Dalton, handed Caleb an official-looking envelope. His hands shook a little as he opened it. Inside were the final adoption papers. Leia Hart was now legally his daughter. The word hit him like a physical blow. Daughter. Dalton clapped him on the shoulder. Congratulations, Rhodes. You are a father. After Dalton left, Caleb sat staring at the papers. Leia was nearby, focused on her schoolwork. Leia, he said, his voice quiet. Come here a minute. He showed her the documents. These make it official. You are my daughter now, permanently. You can keep the name Hart, or you can take mine. It is your choice. She looked from the papers to his face. What if I wanted both? She asked. Leia Hart Rhodes. So I can keep Papa's name, but have yours too. A wall around Caleb's heart that had stood for years finally crumbled. I think that is perfect, he said. She threw her arms around his neck, and for the first time, he held her with the certainty of a father. Does this mean you are really my father now? She whispered. I have been since the day you came with me, he answered. This just makes the law agree. She pulled back and looked right into his soul. I love you, Caleb, she said. It had been 3 long years since anyone had said those words to him. He had run from love, certain it only led to pain. But he could not run from this little girl. He could only tell her the truth. "I love you too, Laya," he said, his throat tight. "It is more than okay to say that." She gave him a brilliant smile, the kind a child gives only when they feel completely safe, and then went back to her homework as if she had not just healed his entire world. That night, long after Laya was asleep, Caleb took out an old letter he had written to his late wife, Emma. He added a few new lines at the bottom. "I signed the papers today. Her name is Laya Hart Rhodes. She wanted to keep her father's name and take mine. You would like her, Emma. She is teaching me that staying put is not the same as being trapped. I used to think love was just the start of loss, but she is showing me they are tangled together in a way that can make you whole. I am still scared, but I am here. I am trying. I hope you know I will never forget you or Tommy. But I am finally learning to carry my grief instead of letting it carry me." He folded the letter, knowing he had finally stopped running. Inside the small cabin against the howling winter wind, a father and a daughter were building a family. That night, he lay on his cot listening to Leia's steady breathing from her room. For the first time in 3 years, Caleb Rhodes fell asleep without dreaming of running. He slept like a man who had finally come home. Spring came to Wyoming slow and muddy, and the whole ranch exploded with activity for foal-in season. Caleb worked 18-hour days, assisting with difficult births and checking on the mares. He would fall onto his cot exhausted, only to be woken up 3 hours later for another birth. Through it all, Leia learned to fend for herself. She got ready for school, made her own meals, and never complained. She just adapted, like she had learned to do her whole life. One Thursday evening, Caleb dragged himself back to the cabin, expecting to find her asleep. Instead, he found her sitting at the table, waiting up for him. Her school papers were scattered on the table, and tears were rolling down her cheeks. Caleb's weariness vanished. He rushed over and knelt beside her. "Lila, what is it? Are you hurt?" She shook her head, wiping at her face. "I am just dumb. Miss Pritchard wants us to write about our family, but I do not have a history. Papa never talked about his people, and I do not know Mama's either." Caleb's heart ached for her. He pulled up a chair and took her hand. "Everyone has a history, Lila. Sometimes you just have to dig a little harder for it. Tell me what you know about your papa." She sniffled. "He came from Ohio. He was good with horses. He met Mama at a church social, and they came out here for a better life. But that is it. No grandparents. No big stories. Just nothing." Caleb gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "A story does not have to be about great deeds. It is about good folks trying their best. Your papa was a fine horseman who loved you more than anything. Now, what do you remember about your mama?" "She was kind," Lila said, her voice growing soft. "She had brown hair like me and smelled of fresh bread and lavender. Before she passed, she taught me my letters every single day." "Well, there is your history right there," Caleb said. "A hard-working father and a mother who believed in learning. They moved across the country to build a future for their daughter. That is the story of this land." "But Annie's grandfather was in the war," she protested. "And Billy's family helped build the railroad. They have real stories." "Your story is about being brave when you have lost everything," Caleb said firmly. "You write that. And if Miss Pritchard has any trouble with it, you tell her to come talk to me." A small smile touched Lila's lips. "You would do that?" "In a heartbeat," he promised. She picked up her pencil. "Will you help me?" "I will do better than that," Caleb said, settling in. "Let me tell you a few things your papa told me. He started out mucking stalls, see? He learned about horses from the ground up by being patient and paying attention. That teaches you that you earn your way to the top," Caleb continued. Lila started writing carefully. "And the lavender you remember from your mama? She grew that herself. Frontier women had to be resourceful. That is another good lesson to hold on to." The story came together, page by page. It was not a grand tale, but it was honest and true. When they finished, Lila had filled 3 pages. "Thank you," she said softly. "You helped me see that my ordinary story is important." The most important things are ordinary, Caleb replied. Love, hard work, kindness. Those are the things that truly matter. He stood up and stretched. You have worked enough. How about I make us some supper? I will teach you how to make patient stew. Your papa probably knew it. You just put everything you have in a pot and wait for it to turn into something good. As they cooked in the small cabin, a wave of gratitude washed over Caleb. This simple life, this family he had found by chance, felt more like home than any place he had ever been. A week or so later, the worst of the foaling season was over. Caleb was working with the difficult mare who was now gentle as a lamb when a rider came up the road. It was Martha from the town restaurant. Martha, Caleb said, smiling with genuine surprise. What brings you all the way out here? I borrowed a horse and thought I would check on you two, she said, dismounting carefully. She looked around the tidy ranch and then back at him. You have settled in well. I can see it in your face. The restlessness is gone. I did not know it was so obvious, he admitted. Everything is obvious if you know how to look, she said wisely. She looked over at the mare. Is this the one Dalton bought at auction? The one with the trust issues? Caleb just nodded. Seems she has come around, Martha said with a knowing look, much like someone else I know. They walked to the cabin, and Martha handed Caleb a letter that had come to town for him. He recognized the handwriting. It was from Samuel, his father's old partner down in Texas. The note was short. His father's small property had finally sold, and the money was being held for him. It was not a fortune, but it was enough to buy a piece of land. It is from my father's place, he told Martha. What will you do with it? She asked. He did not even have to think about it. I will save it for Lila. For her schooling, or a dowry, whatever she needs when she is grown. I am making enough to take care of us now. This will be for her. Martha's eyes shone with pride. You really have changed, Caleb Rhodes. The man who rode into town 6 months ago would have only thought about the next drink or the next town. Now you are planning for a child's future. When they went to get Leia from school, her happy shriek at seeing Martha could have startled a horse. She threw herself into the older woman's arms. A whirlwind of hugs and stories. That evening, after Leia was tucked in bed, Martha and Caleb sat by the fire. That little girl is blooming, Martha said, her voice soft. You have done a real good thing here, Caleb. He stared into the flames for a long moment. I reckon we saved each other, he said quietly. She needed a home, and I needed a reason to finally stop running. But are you happy? Martha asked, looking him square in the eye. He considered it something he had not dared to do for years. Yeah, he admitted. I am. Then Martha shared her own news. I am selling the restaurant. A young couple offered me a price I could not refuse, and at 63 I am tired. Seeing the worry on his face, she smiled. Do not you worry. I will still be around. I am just done working 18-hour days. Before she left, she squeezed his hand. Emma would be so proud of you. After Martha rode away, Leia slipped her small hand into Caleb's. She told me you saved my life, the little girl said. She said you were a hero because you were the only one who stopped. Caleb looked down at their joined hands, his rough and calloused against her trusting one. He did not feel like a hero. He just felt like a man who finally did something that mattered. He was trying to learn Martha's other lesson, too, to stop waiting for disaster and just let himself have this ordinary happiness. Life on the ranch found a good rhythm. Leia was doing wonderfully in school and had her own horse. Caleb had earned his place as foreman, his judgment trusted by all. But that hard-won peace was broken one June day. A man named Martin Hart arrived, saying he was a cousin of Leia's father. He was thin, with eyes that were all calculation. I have come to collect my kin, he announced in Mr. Dalton's office. She will be useful on my farm. Caleb felt a chill run down his spine. She is 8 years old. Hart's smile was cold. Old enough to earn her keep. That girl is my kin, and I have the legal papers to prove it. Leah Hart Rhodes is my daughter now, so you have no claim. Martin's face turned hard. Those papers were only filed because no other family showed up. Well, I am here now, and I will fight this adoption in court. It will cost you time and money I reckon you do not have. Dalton, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. Mr. Hart, let me ask you something. Where were you 6 months ago when Leah was sleeping in a stockroom and begging for food? Where were you for the 17 days she sat on those steps waiting for a father who was already gone? I did not know. You did not know because you did not care to know. Dalton's voice was quiet but firm. Now you show up, wanting to take her. You mentioned how useful she could be before you even called her family. That tells me everything I need to know. What I want is my own business. The law will side with the man who has been raising her, loving her, and providing for her. Caleb stood tall, making sure Martin felt his presence. You go ahead and contest the adoption. But you will be fighting me, the Daltons, and every soul in this county who has seen how happy Leah is. You will lose. You are making a big mistake, Rhodes. I can make things hard on you. You can sure try, but I have nothing left to lose except for her. And I will not lose her. So you do what you feel you have to, and I will do what I know I must, which is protect my daughter. Martin stormed off, leaving Caleb in a cold sweat. He worried that this ghost from Leah's past could tear their new life apart. That evening, he and Dalton rode into town to see the lawyer, a sharp woman named Rebecca Winters. She listened carefully to the whole story. You are on solid ground, she said. The adoption is final. His blood relation means nothing now, especially since he never tried to find her when she was orphaned. But, she warned, he could still cause trouble. He could drag you into court again and again. It would be costly and draining. So what do we do? Caleb asked. We get ahead of it, Rebecca replied. I will file a motion with the judge. We will document everything from how you found her to how well she is doing now. We will get statements from her teacher and from the Daltons. We will build a case so strong that any judge would laugh him right out of the courtroom. They worked for 3 hours, building the legal wall that would protect Leah's place in Caleb's life. As they were leaving, Rebecca added one more thing. Has Leah ever formally said she wants to stay with you? Her wishes carry a lot of weight. I know this is scary, Caleb, but you have done everything right. The law is on your side, and more importantly, Leah is on your side. Riding back to the ranch, Caleb was filled with fear. He had finally built something worth fighting for. Back at the cabin, Leah was waiting up for him, wrapped in a blanket by the fire. What is wrong? She asked, reading his face. He knew he had to tell her the truth. A man came here today, he said gently. He claims to be your father's cousin, and he wants you to live with him. Her face went pale. I do not have a cousin. Papa never talked about family. That is probably why, Caleb said, taking her hand. But the important thing is I am not letting him take you. We have the law on our side. But I need to know if a judge were to ask you, what would you want? I would say I want to stay right here with you. This is my home. Her voice was strong, even though her eyes showed fear. That man is not family. Family are the people who show up and stay. That is what you taught me. Then that is what we will tell the judge, Caleb promised. No matter what, you are staying right here. I am your father, and nobody is going to change that. She hugged him tightly, and he held on, feeling her small body tremble. The weeks went by, but Martin Hart never filed a thing. Rebecca figured he knew his case was weak. The threat, however, had shown Caleb just how much he stood to lose. He had built a future from the ruins of his past, and he would protect it. One summer evening, Leah asked him, Do you think you will ever get married again? The question caught him by surprise. I do not know. I have not thought about it. Why? I heard Sarah telling Jack that you are still young, and that I need a mother. I do not want you to marry someone just for me, she said quietly. But I do not want you to be lonely either. Caleb thought for a moment. I am not lonely. There is a difference between being alone and being lonely. But if the right person came along, someone who wanted to be part of what we have built. Maybe someday. He looked at her seriously. But you need to know this, Laya. You are my priority. You are my daughter, and that will never change. Good, she said with a smile. I like our family just the way it is. Me too, Caleb agreed. It works. As the summer wore on, Caleb realized that being a father had changed him. It made him want a future that stretched on for years and years. He started to allow himself to hope again, to imagine watching Laya grow up, maybe even becoming a grandfather one day. He had spent so long believing he was done with hope. But now he was finally walking toward the future, instead of running from it. In August, the whole ranch gathered for Laya's 8th birthday party. Sarah Dalton had organized everything, saying that every year of life was worth a big celebration. There was food, music, and a beautiful cake. Laya stood in the middle of it all, surrounded by people who loved her. She was not with the family she was born into, but with the family she had found, the one that had chosen her. And as Caleb watched her laugh, he knew, deep in his bones, that she was truly and finally home. Caleb watched her, just glowing with happiness. He thought to himself, this is how a childhood ought to be. Not sitting on some cold steps wondering where your next meal is, but laughing with friends, eating way too much cake, and knowing deep in your bones that you are loved. When the sun started to dip low, Laya found Caleb resting on the corral fence. She climbed up and sat right next to him. Thank you, she said, her voice soft, for stopping for me, for making this my home, for being my daddy. He looked over at her. You gave me a home too, little bit. A reason to stop running and plant some roots. So I figure we're about even. No, sir, she said, shaking her head. We are not even. We are family. And that is a whole lot better. They sat quiet for a spell, watching the first stars appear. A year ago, he was a man with no direction. Now he was a father, a foreman, a man who belonged to this land. The little girl who waited on cold steps had found her home, and the man running from sorrow had found himself put back together by a child who needed him. They had saved each other, plain and simple. Caleb and Laya found the pieces they were missing in one another. They proved that family is not always about blood. It is about choosing someone day after day. It is about showing up and staying put, especially when things get tough. It means building something strong enough to weather any storm that comes your way. Laya leaned against his shoulder, tired out from all the excitement. Caleb wrapped a steady arm around her. Together they watched the dark settle over the ranch, over the home they had built. Neither one of them was waiting anymore. In stopping their long wait, they had found everything they were ever looking for. They found a home, a family, and a powerful love that could heal just about anything.